So I just crossed the border from Singapore to Malaysia. So when I was at the checkpoint just now, right, I saw so many people leaving Malaysia. And then I remember I read something in the news saying that a lot of Malaysians are leaving. So we're not talking about leaving temporarily. We're talking about uprooting their lives and leaving permanently. Where are all these Malaysians leaving to? Some might say Australia or the UK. But the really obvious answer, right, is actually across the border. Not where I came from, Singapore to Malaysia, but a lot of Malaysians are actually leaving to Singapore. So we are looking at a staggering demographic shift happening. In just the last 5 years, over 61,000 Malaysians have officially renounced their citizenship. That is roughly 10,000 people every single year deciding to hand over their blue passports for a red one. And it's not like Singapore is giving the citizenships very easily. But at least for some, right, I guess the real main pull is that it's really just a stone throw away. I only took like an hour to get here and it only takes an hour to get back. Aside from that, it's pretty similar in terms of culture, and you can go back anytime you want and technically get paid more with the stronger Singaporean currency. So the vast majority aren't really migrating. They're just kind of moving to a place that they're already somewhat familiar. But the bigger issue here is that they are severing their legal ties to their homeland, Malaysia, forever. According to the latest data from the National Registration Department, a huge 93.8% of these renunciations were specifically for Singapore. That means that the majority of the people who are leaving Malaysia actually left for Singapore. But why now, right? You'll think that with the ringgit rising so much recently, almost pushing 1:4 with the US dollar, and it's kind of like 1:3.1 with the Singapore dollar, people might want to stay, right? Because the Malaysian ringgit is actually getting stronger. But I think over the years, right, the Malaysian government has actually lost its ability to show strength and instill confidence in a lot of Malaysians because their governance over the years has been a bit wishy-washy and not here, not there. So imagine you're someone that just graduated in Malaysia. You're going to be a doctor or engineer. You're a skilled worker essentially. But why are all these skilled workers actually leaving their passport behind? They're leaving behind primarily, I think, because of frustrations and a lot of, I think, glass ceilings. Because in Malaysia, right, there's this whole idea that you can only go this far. If you aren't from the majority race in Malaysia, the politicians are already seeing you as a minority. And I think I come from a place that I've actually lived in Malaysia for a couple of years. I was working in Maybank. And there is a little bit of this, I don't want to say race issue, but there's a whole like type C versus type M thing. Type C being Chinese and type M being Malay. When we think about the push-pull factors, right, these are a lot of the push factors. I mean, we've talked a lot about the pull factors already, like Singapore having a great currency and safety. But when we talk about push factors, I think we can't really ignore the fact that there is a racial issue. I know a lot of us like to think like racism doesn't exist, but in the rest of the world, when we're not looking at Singapore, it really does. Because Singapore, as we know, is a commingled cosmopolitan melting pot. But when we look at Malaysia, it's a bit of a mix. I don't really want to say it, right? But I think Malaysia often likes to take one step forward and two steps back. And I don't really mean this completely in a bad way. It really depends what you prioritize. Because if you're like the economics of things, sure, Malaysia economically may get better off. But socially, I think it's only becoming more conservative over the years. So if you're someone that prioritizes social freedom, right, this is a massive driver for those who feel suffocated by the rising conservatism. And that's also why I think that's another push factor for why people are leaving. It's pretty backwards. And if you think about it, right, recently we had like, Blackpink saying that they were skipping Malaysia on their tour. And there was also this other incident with the band 1975 where there was like some gay kissing on stage and that caused a lot of backlash. So aside from all this obvious censorship going around, there's also something that Malaysia does that a lot of other countries don't. They actually have the feds governing conservative and religious bureaucracy. So this, in some ways, limits personal and social freedom. There's this term called JAKIM, which basically is their way of managing and their Department of Islamic Development. It's just a lot of red tape that I guess if you're not privy to the preferential race or you are some other race, you might not be down for that. Okay, and let me just put it that way. But here's where it gets a little complicated. The grass may not always be greener on the other side, right? So we saw this case of like a private hire driver in Singapore who renounced his Malaysian citizenship years ago and is now saying he like deeply regrets it because even though you get paid more in Singapore, right, something people don't really realize, or I think it's not their first thought, is that the cost of living in Singapore is so much higher. That's also why like people like me or whoever else is sometimes going to JB or Malaysia for weekend escapes, because it's just cheaper here. I guess the moral of the story is that if you're a Malaysian, I think you should treat Singapore as a place to make money, but not necessarily the place to settle down and live and retire, right? And I think as a Singaporean, I guess this is where like there's a little bit of like animosity, and especially as a male, you know what's the most depressing thing is that I guess Malaysians can just come as a PR, they work here for 30 years, they close their CPF accounts and then move back to Malaysia. But while a natural born Singaporean male would have to serve conscription, serve national service, and some might say it's unfair, but I guess that's the price you pay, right? We are protecting our nation for safety and a higher GDP, right? But it's just quite ironic that we largely serve NS to protect as a deterrent against Malaysia and I guess other parts of Southeast Asia, and we're just letting them come in as well. So I don't know what we're doing. At the end of the day, if 10,000 people are leaving a year, I guess there is some good reason for them to want to come to Singapore. And yeah, every decision of course comes with consequences. If Singapore is going to be 3 times larger than it is today, if we keep importing people, we keep allowing for migrants to come in, if we keep like not caring about the white paper, then would it still be governable and unshakable? Would Singapore still be the same? I guess that's the question we gotta ask ourselves, right? As always, if you like this sort of financial breakdown, do check out our website for more of our newsletters and educational materials. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!